Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we're going to be taking a look at the new Christopher Nolan film Tenet. We got an early screening. We went and saw it last night. We are excited to talk about it. We're also going to take a look at Disney's The New Mutants because that finally came out, and we also went and saw that. Very exciting week back at the movies. Andy, when was the last time you were at a movie theater?
Well, actually, not too long ago. I forgot which one. Oh yeah, we saw Inception
We did go see
the other week.
Inception.
We have been seeing the classics there fairly often, but it's definitely been a while since I've seen something new with a slightly more crowded theater. So that was nice.
Yeah, I shouldn't laugh. We probably shouldn't be going to the movies, but it is cool to go back. Like it does, there is an energy to it. But obviously, stay safe. We wore masks as much as we could. We'll talk about them when we get to it. We need to talk about the passing of Chadwick Boseman, and we're going to do that in the middle of our show. We're not just going to stick that in news at the beginning because that was actually a really big story. So keep an ear out for that. Before we get to all that, we need to talk about some more casual news. Our first story this week. Andy, you found this headline. What is this? What is
Right.
happening here?
Right. So this is Netflix will make a movie about Martin Shkreli's rare Wu-Tang album purchase. So there's a lot going on here, but what happened is Martin Shkreli, otherwise known as the Farmer Bro, who kind of became infamous for raising the price of a HIV drug from $13 to over $700. He became the face of kind of like gross like capitalism or whatever, and he eventually ran into some trouble with the feds and is currently doing 7 years of prison for securities fraud. But one of the things he did during his time out was purchase a very rare album, one copy album only of the Wu-Tang Clan. He was the sole buyer and bought it for $2 million, and it just kind of locked it in his room. Like he wasn't allowed to play it. It doesn't release it. But upon whenever he went to prison, a lot of his things were seized, including this album. So we're not real sure where it's at exactly, but this movie is going to cover this whole incident, Martin Shkreli and buying this really rare Wu-Tang album.
Was this all like one big bit by Wu Tang to get a deal with Netflix? Because like this seems to have worked out great. Obviously, you made an album that nobody listened to, but it could be total garbage for all we know. Nobody's heard it. Meanwhile, you're getting a movie deal out of it. I mean, that's
Well,
I don't know.
it was bit, it was up for auction. They didn't just sell it to him directly. He was just happened to be the highest bidder. He did at one point try to resell it on eBay when he was running into some legal trouble and needed funding. That went nowhere. And like I said, I think it was eventually seized as part of many of his assets were seized as part of his securities fraud case. I believe he's supposed to get out in 2023 or so.
Really? Okay. Well, he's in like rich kid jail, so like it's not like real, actual county lockup or anything. I'm sure he's playing tennis with,
I mean,
somebody.
he's in with the feds.
Yeah, Michael Cohen or
Who
somebody.
who do you think will play him? Anyone
I
popped
was
up?
just thinking that who plays Martin Shkreli? We've got him on stream if you're watching live.
Topher Grace.
Dane DeHaan. I don't know. No,
That's a good.
Dane DeHaan probably wouldn't do that. He's got that smarmy kind of look to him. Might Topher Grace is that you said?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of real skinny white actors that could
Yeah,
do it.
right. He just look really smug and smarmy. Yeah, apparently after the 2016 election, he streamed the intro to the album in celebration of the results. That's about it. In 2018, a federal court seized the album. So I guess the movie will end with it sitting in a county lockup somewhere.
Yeah, with top men. Top
What
men
a, top men.
are
Yeah.
listening to Wu-Tang right now.
Yes, our fans of Raiders of the Lost Ark understand that reference. Top men. Very exciting, I guess. This is the amazing thing about streaming services. They can make movies about anything. You can make a movie about an inanimate object, literally, about an album that hasn't actually done anything. I'm interested to see how it goes, right? How it changes hands. It'd be a bit of a MacGuffin picture, I guess. It's like if Pulp Fiction was about the briefcase and not about the journey to get the
about the
briefcase. Like
right.
it just kind of follows the trail, I suppose. So
Well, and while Martin Shkreli he's a pretty despicable character. It is very interesting because he went from this very kind of overconfident, a little bit like a Wolf of Wall Street kind of character. Like he was very young and very successful in his. He started like a pharmaceutical company and was also a hedge fund manager in like his late 20s, early 30s. Was kind of the poster child, and he was very successful, and he was like just winning. But then he got in trouble with the feds for securities fraud. Also had to go to prison early because of threats made against former First Lady Hillary Clinton. And I mean, like the script writes itself. Like he's kind of a terrible character, but he's hit on all these like weird highlights. But also like it's the rise and fall of the man.
Yeah, it's a bit like Roger Stone, right? Like he'd rather be infamous than not famous at all, but he wears all these kooky outfits and does strange things, so you can't help but kind of stare at the guy. I don't know. Maybe it'd be good. I guess we'll find out. This and other things Netflix are doing always make for good news. Our next story, Mulan is releasing to all Disney Plus subscribers for free in December. This obviously runs counter to the news that Mulan will be available this weekend, right?
This week, that's right. This Friday.
$30 on Disney Plus for subscribers. You can pay $30 to watch Mulan, or you can wait 90 days and watch it for free on the platform. This is a surprise, I think, to some people, but we talked about this when they announced that Mulan was going to cost $30, that inevitably it would be coming to Disney Plus for free. So I guess this is not too much of a surprise to us. What do you think about this?
Well, you're exactly right. We were wondering, what is their strategy going to be? When are they going to release it to the public? They have to at some point. It can't just be perpetually a rental. So we were speculating, is it going to be 1 month, 2 months, longer, 6 months? So it looks like the magic number is 3, which is traditionally what the release window has been. It has been 90 days from theatrical release to home video. This is kind of in between because it won't be available to most subscribers until December. But if you want to pay those $30 between now and then, and that's going to be interesting because you might have a whole bunch of people pay for it now, and then maybe in a month, you'll get more or less. We really don't know how it's going to turn out. This is a big experiment. We're going to see. Bold Cinema will be paying the $30.
Yes.
So we can see and review it.
Yeah, we talked about it before the show. Andy and I are both going to pony up and watch this for next week. So if you have the means, please subscribe to your boys.
We're going to start a GoFundMe.
God, rate and review the show so we can get some love for what we're about to do. Yeah, this frustrates me for a handful of reasons. One, because like Disney's just going against the grain again, right? Like they've done this in the past with a lot of their home video releases. They always have weird policies. They always do it strange. They couldn't just put out VHSs back in the 90s. They had to have these gigantic jewel cases that took up a bunch of room on the shelf. They can't just put their movies in stores. They have to put them in the Disney Vault. And now with Mulan, you have to pay more than the asking price for any other company to watch at home, and it'll be available anyway shortly after. Like, if Disney's marketing strategy here is to convince people not to buy Mulan on Disney Plus, they're doing a great job. Because, like, if we weren't doing this show, I would totally be passing this one up.
Yeah, same here. And people pointed that out online. They said, why are they saying anything? As a business strategy, they could just, keep it to themselves, not say anything about the release and have more people buy it. But I think they want to. I think they still want to use it to get more subscribers come December, and also I think it's just it's like a showing of goodwill towards everyone involved: theaters, customers, consumers, subscribers, everyone. So if you basically, they're giving us more choice. If you want to see it Friday, you can pony up and see it. If you don't want to pay, you can wait till December.
Yeah, this article mentions towards the bottom that this is one big grand experiment, right? Just like a lot of things that have been happening this summer at the box office. So nobody really knows whether it's going to work or not, whether it will truly be successful. I mean, it's up to Disney, right? I'm sure they're not going to publish these numbers to let us know how it's doing, but I can't imagine this is like a brilliant strategy for them. Somebody has to know going in, hey, this probably isn't the best course of action. I don't know why they're doing it this way, but yeah, it is an experiment. Who knows? Maybe they'll turn a killing and it'll work. I'm not that idyllic though, but we will be watching it for the show. So
yeah. We know, just like we had some renter's remorse when we watched King of Staten Island and Scoob, because we paid for those, and then 6 weeks.
I had renter's remorse when I watched Scoob. Yeah. You did not watch Scoob.
I had renter's remorse for you.
Oh, okay.
But we it was it stung a little bit to see something that was kind of okay, both okay films, and then to see it 6 weeks later. The fact that it's going to be a full 90 days, I think helps a little bit. But I think it still might sting in the end. But at the same time, it looks really good. It looks fantastic. To me, it looks better than a lot of their other live action remakes that they've done. So I am genuinely excited to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm excited to see it. I was more excited to see it, but news like this really knocks me off, man. That and New Mutants, but we'll talk about that in a minute. That's totally unrelated to this. Man, Disney's making some weird moves lately. It's a good thing theaters are opening back up so they can get back on track, I think. And our last story this week, speaking of theaters opening up, Maryland movie theaters are cleared to reopen in time for Tenet. This is interesting. A lot of movie theaters on the East and West Coast have not been opening here in America because of coronavirus and safety measures. Well, it turns out Tenet is opening back up. Theaters are starting to make money again, and suddenly these measures are conveniently not in a spot where they're as important, and we can start opening some theaters again. They're not opening everywhere. Andy knows the story more than me. Andy, is there anything I'm missing here?
So theaters in Maryland, New Jersey, and some in California are going to be opening this Friday specifically for Tenet, but it's going to be on a very, very limited basis. It's going to be at 25% for most. It's not even 50%, 25%, or 100 to 150 people per theater. So it's gonna be pretty small percentage, and still you're missing the big markets like New York and LA. All of New York State is not open. So it's helping. Like I said, they're opening for Tenet, but not fully, not 50%, not 100%.
I hope this is a good thing. Obviously, I don't know anything about pandemic numbers there or how things are looking in those areas, so for all I know, this is not great for them. But having gone to the theater, I can tell you it does feel good to go back, right? That's something people seek in times of tribulation. You want a little bit of normalcy. It's why when things like sports started shutting down, it really felt weird, because suddenly it's not normal to not have sports. It's not normal to not have movies at the summer box office, and it makes a pandemic feel that much more oppressive because we don't have the comforts we're used to. Going back to the theater's nice. It feels good. And that's not just because I do a movie podcast. It feels good to go to the theater and get your popcorn and hang out in your seat and watch the film. Like, I miss doing that stuff. So I hope people in Maryland and New Jersey and San Diego can take advantage of that in a safe capacity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. People want to get back to the theaters, and there's finally something worth going to see, because that was the whole problem all summer is, sure, theaters are open, at least in a limited capacity, but there was nothing to see besides the classics. And once you saw them, well, I mean, we joked about seeing Indiana Jones 3 or 4 times, but really once you've seen one of those classics once, you're not going to keep going back to see Jurassic Park, for instance.
No, that's usually one-time admission only. And even then, you're going to pick and choose from what's available. I mean, we only picked a few films to go see out of the weeks that theaters have been open here. And there's been some good stuff out, but it takes some serious staying power to draw you back to the theater. And the idea is that Tenet may be that film. And with that being said, we should probably jump into the review. First things first, Andy, I can't believe we saw this thing early. Like, this was definitely supposed to be a review for next week. How did this happen? I
am so excited that we got to see, because we never get to see anything early. As much as I've tried to swindle my way into free tickets, we never get to see anything early. But they were running a promotional early screenings on what is it, Monday and Tuesday?
Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All three
so
days before the film.
So basically, three days all week. They've been running some early screening, which is usually an effort to get the buzz out about the film, get the word out. So we snagged a couple of tickets and saw it last night on a Monday.
Yes, we did. I'm excited to talk about it. So without further ado, let me jump right into the summary. This is Christopher Nolan's Tenet. So, Tenet is a difficult film to talk about because I don't want to give too much of the plot away. So to keep it as simple as I can, I'm going to lift a little off the IMDb summary and say this. John David Washington plays a protagonist, recently released from the CIA and acquired to help stop a rogue organization from something worse than the apocalypse. He's given a word, Tenet, and a clue as to where to go, and with the help of fellow compatriots played by Robert Pattinson and Elizabeth Debicki, he is challenged with saving reality as we know it. It is a 2.5-hour action film from Christopher Nolan, the director of Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, The Dark Knight, The Prestige, and all other kinds of giant blockbuster mind-bending films. It has a huge budget, it has a huge plot, it has the huge task of explaining some very difficult concepts to its audience members. Andy, this is going to be a fun one. I don't know how exactly we're going to talk about this, but we're not going to give a lot away because I think...
You can't.
Right. And the fresher you go into this movie, the better. I think that's the way it's meant to be seen. So, with that understanding, Andy, what did you think of Tenet?
Well, first of all, I've been incredibly excited to see this. We haven't seen a Christopher Nolan movie in 3 years since 2017's Dunkirk. So we're excited to see Tenet. And again, it was supposed to be a big summer tentpole and had to be delayed. So we're glad to see it. This is really incredible filmmaking on some levels, but it does have some pretty big glaring issues, which is usually not an issue for Christopher Nolan. Usually he's a solid filmmaker all the way around, is a really incredible storyteller. In this film, he seems to have become kind of obsessed with the action and with the complicated plot and premise. And we have some issues to address, but overall, I really did like it. I did have some really incredible action. And like I said, it was really great to get in the theater, but it does have some issues too.
Yeah, this film is stunning for a lot of reasons. Not only, like you said, is it Christopher Nolan's latest film since 2017's Dunkirk, but also it's a return to form for his ability to tell a story in a fictional universe. Dunkirk was a historical fiction, right? Everything's pretty rooted in reality. There's some elements of nonlinear storytelling, which are his like bread and butter when it comes to making action films, but nothing too weird for him. It's pretty normal. Before that, we had Interstellar, which had elements of time travel and time distortion, right? In the way our astronauts would go down to a planet and come back up, and time would have passed out of their realm of whatever and wormholes. So Inception had a lot of world bending and this idea of shifting realities. Tenet is in that vein, right? It has this element of inversion, which is seen in the trailer, this idea that an object can travel backwards through time, even though it is moving forward in a linear state,
right,
as we know it. A gun can catch a bullet instead of shoot it. It's real weird, and the trailer loosely explains this, and that is kind of the paintbrush with which we are attacking this Jackson Pollock of a painting of a film. Christopher Nolan, I think, does a fantastic job of telling stories like this. The thing is, this one might be his like Icarus too close to the sun moment. It might be too much.
Absolutely.
It is very cool, and I love the concept, but oh my god, does it get nuts. Like, dude, it goes so far over what I expected, and it really takes this concept and turns it up to freaking 11, and you are hanging on for dear life by the end of the movie. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like oh god, there's so much I want to say. So first of all, the trailer, the movie doesn't explain inversion any better than the trailer. So if you've seen the trailer, you've seen like the
Andy,
concept.
Come on, don't give anything away. We talked about this,
you've seen.
No, that's about it. Yeah.
But like if I tried to explain things to you, it would only make it more confusing. A little bit like when Inception came out, it was kind of spoiler proof because you wouldn't be able to explain anything out without another hour's worth of explanation. Christopher Nolan does succeed in bringing you incredible experiences and scenes, bringing things to the screen that you have not seen before, particularly with the action, particularly with scale. Like he uses real vehicles, real props, real extras. And so he definitely grounds his films. And that's what we get a lot of in this movie. It is a little bit too complicated, I think.
Maybe it's too complicated.
And I've been doing some homework, and it's a really cool idea, and there's some real like interesting science stuff behind it as scientific theory that it's based on. But it might be too much, and it might be, frankly, just too complicated for most people to a point that it's not enjoyable.
Right. So let's let's jump into kind of our actors a little bit. Let's jump into our characters a little bit. We're not going to talk a whole lot about plot because, again, the less you know going in, I think the better. That's how this movie is intended to be seen. So that's where we're going to leave you. Our main lead, John David Washington, this is his first big film following Black Klansman, Spike Lee film, which we both really enjoyed from 2018. He's got a big task in this movie. He's now holding up a very, very expensive Warner Brothers blockbuster. He is this kind of, frankly, man with no name, almost like a Western, right? A wanderer, really, who is basically an elite agent in the CIA who is hired or drafted, I should say, to take on this very supernatural idea of inversion through these items, these elements, these bullets that are inverted and travel backwards, and these pieces of machinery. And the question that's naturally asked is, where are these things coming from, right? How does something get inverted? Who's making it? What can you do with it? What power does that have? And this leads him into this rabbit hole of arms dealing and espionage that we know Christopher Nolan for, like the back of his hand. I mean, Inception had a lot of that stuff, right? Big businesses and corporations moving millions of dollars and taking us, the audience, to exotic locations and faraway places with big skyscrapers and unique architecture to craft these interesting stories. And he does, I think, a pretty fantastic job of that. Being his second big picture, he's got a lot to do. I mean, he's got to deliver a lot of lines very quickly, especially in the opening, in the first act, in which we are like screaming through dialogue and scenes to get to the next point, to move the plot along, to explain more about what's happening. And he does a good job. He's got a lot of emotion in the face, especially around his eyes. And I wonder if he gets that from his dad, Denzel Washington. There are some points where his line reads may fall a bit flat, but he's a young actor, and I don't hold that against him, and it feels pretty natural for a character who's supposed to be kind of cold, a CIA agent, right? I think he does a fine job. Robert Pattinson, I enjoyed a lot as Neil. He's fantastic, this kind of sidekick character to John David Washington that just gets sucked into this. And Elizabeth Debicki plays pause the trailer there. Elizabeth Debicki plays a... Well, she's a concerned woman who's tangled up in these events. I guess I'll leave it at that. Yeah, that's the best way to explain
it. So just to touch a little bit on what you said, this is definitely in like the spy genre. So think of films like obviously James Bond or Mission Impossible. This is kind of Chris Nolan's take on it. And John David Washington, as you said, is our kind of CIA agent. What he does differently than those films is there's less style and it's much more grounded. He doesn't have fancy gadgets or, he doesn't have guns that shoot out of his car, things like that you would see. The stunts are very grounded and very real. But as far as character, this is, I think, one of the kind of flaws of the film. We don't get really deep characters that we've gotten to know in some of his other films, like, of course, in Inception or I always think of the Prestige. One of my absolute favorites. It's a little bit two-dimensional. All our characters, they're likable, yeah, they're fun, but there's not a lot to them. Our main character, played by John David Washington, we don't get to know a ton about him. He doesn't have like anything that he's really struggling with, like the way in Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio's character's Cobb is dealing with the death of his wife. He's kind of lacking this kind of backstory or internal struggle. He's just kind of like the James Bond guy. He's getting the job done, and that kind of goes for all our characters. And I said this last week when we talked about Inception, about there not being enough of women in Chris Nolan's films. We kind of get that problem in here as well. Elizabeth Debicki is just kind of the damsel in distress. She complains a lot about her child. Not complains, is concerned for her child, and she's just kind of helpless the whole movie, and it's really disappointing to see that, because I really expected her to have a lot more kind of agency in the film, and I think he's really missed the boat on character development in this film.
Yeah, our characters, they things move incredibly fast. Think of something like a James Bond film, like the more recent ones, especially starring Daniel Craig. They're films that they will race through exposition in scenes when James Bond is in like a fancy bar in Hong Kong talking to a woman in a red dress, right? And they're talking about like arms dealing and who's been trading things, but tonally, they're just sitting there in a bar, like talking, even though like these concepts are very large. This movie has that same feeling, especially when we're trying to uncover what this organization is about, where things are headed, where things are coming from. It's very similar in that way. So in a lot of ways, this does have like a James Bond feel, which I think is good. In a way, I think Christopher Nolan doing like a James Bond kind of movie feels really good. Very very much in his wheelhouse. So I don't mind that at all. But yes, unfortunately, it lacks the ability for our characters to kind of stretch and breathe a whole lot. I think Robert Pattinson has one of the bigger opportunities to do this because he's not the main character. He's kind of this side character that just kind of comes in and out at will. And he has a little bit more flair, a little bit more panache. He doesn't have to be the foundation, which the audience is building everything on. Elizabeth Debicki's kind of in the same place. John David Washington, man, he's just moving through stuff, and our characters aren't doing human things like sleeping or eating or texting. Like that never happens in this movie. It's just bit to bit, scene to scene. Like we're going from this section to this section to this location to this location. But that's how he does his films. They didn't do that in Interstellar either, and nobody thought that was strange. But in this movie, it feels so much larger because of the concepts that are getting introduced when it comes to inversion and this idea of like physical limitation.
Yeah, I did listen to a Christopher Nolan interview, and he talked about Inception is taking the heist genre to talk about like the world of dreams and things like that, and this is taking the spy espionage genre to talk about basically time and manipulation. I don't want to say time travel, but time, which is a big theme in all of Nolan's work.
Right. So we should probably start to talk about that. I think that's the next place to go. Before we do, let's talk about the action. No. We should talk about the time. That makes the most sense. So, because it's a bit of a chicken and egg. The action causes the time effects cause the action effects. It's a whole thing. So, as far as the special effects go, and this inversion, you see it a bit in the trailer. If you're watching the live stream on Facebook, you can see it right now. Actually, this idea that objects are present in our timeline, but are moving backwards in their own personal timeline. They show this with a bullet that John David Washington basically catches out of a wall when he pulls the trigger because the bullet is moving backwards in time, even though it is in our timeline going forward. Inversion is what they call it. It is very complicated, and if you think that explanation is complicated, the movie does not do a whole lot more to explain it to you. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much what they tell you, and you have to just start drawing conclusions for yourself. Andy, what do you think about this?
So, at its heart, it's a time travel movie, but not in the traditional sense. You think of something like Back to the Future, where Marty McFly goes back in time to change something, and then go back to the present. That's kind of what happens in most time travel movies. You're going to the past to change some event that will affect the future. In this, you go backward through time, but you're not actually changing anything. You're making sure that the future that's supposed to happen happens. It's basically like two sides of a coin. In a way, it's really hard to explain, but people have to come from the past/present and the future, and they meet at certain points to make sure certain events happen a certain way. And they have to, so you kind of have to do almost like a U-turn is the way I'm thinking. If you have two cars going down the road and one of them does a U-turn, that's a little bit how I've been thinking about it. So it's
inherently confusing, but Andy, you're doing a fine job.
It's a really impressive concept, but this idea that things are moving backwards, and it creates some incredible set pieces and action. There's a big car chase scene. Reminded me of the chasing from the Matrix almost, where there's just all this cool car stuff happening. Like I said, gunfights, fist fights. I read about Chris Nolan having some of his like extras and the fight choreography actually be done in reverse. Not done forward and reverse, but literally just fought in reverse to get the effect right. So it's a really high concept sci-fi premise. It might be a little bit too high concept.
Right. And we'll talk about that in a second. Fundamentally, what's happening is this. We understand the world around us with a set of rules and limitations, and there are objects in the world of Tenet that do not follow those rules. And that makes for interesting, tense action scenes because part of the characters in the film are using things that we know. You fire a gun and a bullet comes out and hits something, but the other part, there's other characters who are using objects we don't understand. We don't know what will happen when you fire that gun versus that one. So when you have these characters fighting, when you have car chase sequences where things aren't quite what they seem, you get interesting tension because in our world, our characters are just as fragile as they've always been, but within the world of Tenet, they are forced to deal with ideas they don't understand. And that, in a way, is what works about these crazy physics ideas of inversion. Because when you're watching an action scene and you're thinking, I don't know what's going to happen next, the characters in the film don't either. And that brings you into it with them because you feel the tension that they feel. You don't know exactly how things are going to go, and you can just see the breadcrumbs of what will happen soon based on, I don't know, a bullet hole or a weird whatever. And it's really baffling. And in that way, I think the tension works well. I think it still functions as proper action, and that serves as a great through line for these wonderful set pieces. And we should start talking about the action proper. Do you want to jump into that?
Yeah, so we get some pretty massive set pieces here. We know that Chris Nolan likes to destroy things and blow things up. As we've seen in the trailer, he crashes a 747 into an airport for reasons we won't go into. That scene, we've seen part of it in the trailer. It is so much bigger when it actually happens. And that's part of a larger set piece as well involving that airport. But there's also an incredible car chase scene. There's an incredible kind of heist that happens on the road as well. There's there's other people besides John David Washington that are involved in this Tenet or this kind of fight with people from the future moving backwards. So we eventually get some pretty big set pieces. And particularly if you've seen the most recent final trailer, the third trailer, that one sadly gives a lot away. I didn't actually watch that until after I saw the movie, and I'm so glad that I didn't, because there's a lot of really great scenes that are kind of given away.
Yeah, I intentionally chose not to run it here on stream. I've seen it. If you haven't seen it, don't watch it. It gives away more. You don't. This trailer does a fine job of presenting just enough information for tone without giving anything really away. So, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What it reminded me of, though, is like stunts that you would see in a Mission Impossible movie or a James Bond movie, probably more Mission Impossible, but even more grounded, even more real. They're I guess less based on luck, and just, Christopher Nolan just loves to ground everything, and just like the cars and the vehicles and the people and everything he uses, it just adds so much, and it looks even more kind of real, I guess.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan's action is really an outstanding thing, because Christopher Nolan, as he said in interviews, is kind of a just shoot it director. He gives somebody a camera, gives them a couple lenses, they've got the color grading worked out, they're like, hey, go stand over there, shoot this thing, shoot that thing, film this over here. Like, he's actually really simple in that way, and for action directing, that stuff works great. You don't want it to be overly complicated. You don't want, like, Taken 3 with 100 jump cuts, like trying to figure out how Liam Neeson is jumping over a fence. You kind of just want flat action outright. And so when you have these wonderful scenes of car chases on a highway and cars flipping over and gunfights and big action, buildings exploding and people storming an orchestra hall with a bunch of hostages in it, all that stuff works out great. Big gunfights. That stuff plays awesome, especially when you have a director like Nolan who isn't going to make a ton of cuts. He's just going to show you what's happening in a few scenes and you're on your way to the next. Like, that stuff's good, it's rich, and it works great when you're wrecking a Boeing 747 into a warehouse and filming the whole thing. You get all the goods, you get these great angles, it looks fantastic. What's particularly interesting about Tenet is it's more than that, though. You're not just getting an action scene as we understand it, you're getting things moving backwards through the action scene simultaneously as it goes forward as we understand it. Somebody's not just shooting a gun in one of these scenes, they're shooting the gun backwards, which I know sounds weird. I know on its face sounds strange, but it makes for something that's totally unique that I haven't seen before. And that's, my God, we need more of that in blockbusters, man. In the age of reboots and nostalgia and remakes, Nolan turning out this, like, gonzo level action is outstanding, and I love it, and I'm all about it. But man, the last two acts of this film are a physics lesson, man. And if you're not paying attention, like I would wager, don't get up and go to the bathroom when you watch this, right? Don't don't not pay attention.
Well, it's not going to matter.
I mean,
you're not going to be able to explain it. Which
you'll
which I
get
did
the right.
which I did want to
Yes.
mention. So one of our character tells us, don't try to think about it too much, and that's not to dismiss the plausibility of it or how convoluted it's what she says. Focus on the point of inversion is to look at the world in a different way, look at time in a different way, and it's about perspective ultimately, and that's what we end up getting. A lot of our big action scenes, we're going to see them from one or more points of view. You're going to see an action scene play out multiple ways. It actually reminds me of Memento a little bit, but kind of in essentially different flows of time. And the thing is, while I can conceptually think about this, about, an object being able to travel backwards in time, the challenge to film that and to have to do things backwards. I mean, that means some of these car chases, that means someone had to drive backwards or to make these things like incredibly dangerous stunts. So just the logistics of getting it on film, this concept is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I think there's moments when it feels like a goofy, I don't know, a goofy sci-fi film from the 70s when you'd have a character walking backwards through a scene, so it looks like they're walking forwards, but things are moving back. Like the end of Weird Al's Amish Paradise, right? That last shot where he's walking backwards, but the world is going forward. In a couple of small scenes, it may feel that way a little, but in its best moments, it creates this totally unreal effect that I've never seen. And man, what a great time at the movies. That's exactly what we need more of. It's so creative in a way that hasn't been done before, and I really respect it for that. I think this movie needs to be praised not only for its visual effects, but for its editing, because so much of it feels practical. That's the other thing. Nolan does not do a lot of CGI. So a lot of the stuff, if they could do it in camera, that's how they're doing it. They'd film it both ways and then string the edits together, which is crazy. And that makes this feel like a wholly unique thing. The question to ask is, Andy, is Tenet too complicated?
I think it definitely is, and I think it might be, and it might frustrate some audiences. But like I said, if you think about it more in something like the spy genre, Mission Impossible, James Bond, if you think about it more like that, you don't go into James Bond or Mission Impossible looking for, huge, deep character studies or things like that. You're looking for action. You're looking for fun. You do want to have good characters. So Nolan's just kind of leaning into that genre more than this. By the way, I also, while thinking about this, I kind of came up with a little bit better analogy about inversion. Okay. Instead of thinking of, an object traveling backwards in time, it's really two timelines where everyone is moving forward and then everyone is also moving backwards. It's not necessary, and you're just seeing one from a different perspective.
I don't know if that's easier to understand, but I think it is more accurate to the film. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, if
having seen it, that makes more sense to me. But listening to you say it, I don't know if anybody's gonna get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get where you're coming from. Yeah, it's just saying something is moving backwards is not quite right because it isn't. That's not necessarily what's happening. But I don't know. I've heard people. When Inception came out, I was working at the movies when Inception came out a decade ago, and I remember people coming out of that theater opening night and being like, I didn't get it. It was too confusing. I don't understand. And after seeing Inception for myself, I thought, it's not that complicated. Fundamentally, it all makes sense, especially when you have this convenient idea of a dream to hide things in, to mask realities. You can say, well, this doesn't really make sense, but it's a dream, right? I mean, when we reviewed Inception last week, I said, hey, there's some things in here that don't work, but it's a dream. It's kind of fine, right? You don't overthink it. Tenet does not have that luxury. Tenet has to explain everything in reality as we understand it, and that's where I think it might be too complicated. That's where I think it might be too much, because at some point you can't even anticipate what's going to happen in a scene anymore. You don't have any frame of reference for how things are going to go because we don't understand the rules of the universe we're in. And that can be frustrating. And at some point in 2.5 hours, you might go, okay, you know what? I'm lost. I know I did. and it's okay. The movie pulls you through, and it makes many efforts to try to keep you pulling along. But ultimately, it's a film I think that demands attention in a second viewing. I think this is a film
Yeah,
you need to go
absolutely,
see twice.
absolutely. And
Yeah,
I think I'll enjoy it even more on second viewing now that I understand. I mean, same with in Inception, it was much better on second viewing. Also, it just like you said, that there's so much going on, and it is a little too complicated, I think. But if you just kind of go with it and don't think about it too much, like you said, with Inception, it was complicated, but if you could kind of hang in there for the ride, this you're gonna get lost if you think about it too much. And honestly, some people have complained about not being able to hear people talk, dialogue not being audible, which is a common complaint in Chris Nolan. But you got to remember, he's doing this on purpose. If you only understand 50% of what characters are saying, it's because he only wants you to understand 50%.
yeah.
Because there's parts where characters are talking like very quickly, saying important things, but they have like masks on and they're talking through like microphones, and it's real like you're not going to get it all, but that's okay. Like you don't need to. If he wanted you to understand everything, he would put subtitles. He would make sure it was clear enough, but that's not the point. He doesn't want to spoon feed the audience.
Yeah, this is a divisive opinion. Going back and looking at review threads last night after we saw it, almost. I mean, I'd say probably 50% of the comments I saw were people complaining about the audio. Oh my God, I couldn't hear anything. I wanted to get up and leave because I couldn't understand anything. And you're right. On top of big action explosions and Nolan's penchant for sound mixing, where he puts the audio on action way up and the audio on dialogue way down, you're also watching an international espionage film. We're traveling to multiple countries with people speaking in multiple accents, on occasion multiple languages, but you get subtitles for different languages, obviously, usually in hushed tones because they're being sneaky and quiet. It's hard to hear things in this movie, but like listen and like look at people's lips as they're saying words, and like it comes through. Like I'm hard of hearing in one ear, and I was able to get through on this okay. I would like to watch it with subtitles the second time around, and I'm debating whether or not I want to go see this in IMAX for round two, or go to somewhere where I can get one of those closed captioning devices and watch it with subtitles. I'd probably end up going for IMAX just because I've seen it once already. But there is a lot of dialogue and exposition, and that can be frustrating. But you and I were fine with it. Like I think you can manage.
So here's the way because as soon as it started, I was like, oh, I'm having trouble hearing, I'm not understanding. And then I remembered it's Nolan. It doesn't really matter if you catch everything. And I kind of relaxed and didn't worry about it. And I got everything that I needed to. I definitely didn't get everything, but also I didn't worry about it. I didn't worry that I was like missing out on a ton of things.
Yeah, and you know, I embrace these long run times in these films. I know some people that's a challenge, and normally, being that we go see movies every week, it can be frustrating. But like, man, when I walked into New Mutants, I was like, this is a 95-minute romp. This will be over in an hour and a half. Obviously, there's not a whole lot here. This one, I was down for the ride. I could not wait to see where we tumbled down this rabbit hole, to see where Christopher Nolan was taking us next. And ultimately, I think that's what's important about it. We should talk about, before we are done, we need to talk about the music. Andy, do you want to talk about this real quick? Let me tee it up for you.
Okay.
The music is done by a composer named Ludwig Göransson. Hans Zimmer was not available for this. He was working on Dune with Denis Villeneuve. So that's
which we also
Hans
need to
Zimmer
talk
was
about
doing,
in a minute.
Yes, we need to talk about Dune very briefly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, a great score by Ludwig Göransson, who I haven't heard any of his stuff before. But again, it's another kind of minimalist score, similar to Hans Zimmer, but also very different. An exciting part of, I think, a big part of what makes the film. I went to go listen to it. It's not out yet because the movie doesn't come out till Friday. But the score is a good. Important part. By the way, I did want to point out the most unbelievable part of this movie was the fact that there was a full audience at the opera. That's like no, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but they were in Russia and foreign countries. I'm sure I'm sure Russians go to the opera all the time. The score is pretty good. Ludwig Göransson is the composer of the Creed films, Creed 1 and 2. He also did Black Panther, and most recently he did The Mandalorian. So we have heard his stuff before. But this one's different. This is unlike those, because this has some really brilliant elements of reversal in the music. Instead of playing a cymbal sound, they'll record it and play it backwards, right? For this element of inversion in the audio. It makes for some really uncanny sounds. It makes for some really unnatural sounding soundtracks, but they keep the beats and the melody consistent enough that it doesn't sound too out of place. It still sounds like a film soundtrack proper, but it sounds otherworldly, which is really effective. And at times, man, like a racing pace, like they'll just be moving really long, really. They'll be moving along really fast in the music to make action feel very tense, and it works really well. I actually really enjoyed the score to this.
We need to talk about Kenneth Branagh. Before
okay. I debated including him, but we should. He is a prominent actor in this film. We should talk about him.
He's the big bad guy. So like in any James Bond or Mission Impossible film, you got a big bad guy. He is the one. He's basically a Russian arms dealer who's our antagonist. And he has a very thick Russian accent. Again, he's going to be hard to understand, too. I didn't understand a lot of what he said either. Again, doesn't matter. But I think he does do a good job. And, you know, he's worked with Nolan before. He was in Dunkirk. He's in the film. He's an important part of the film. I just wanted to touch on him. I did think he did a good job.
Yeah, he really did. He's very imposing, and he fits surprisingly well into this role of like this like mega wealthy arms dealer, like who's just not afraid of anything. There's definitely some odd moments with him tonally, because he's supposed to be hard to read. He's supposed to be one of those almost like a Bond villain, right? He's supposed to be a little like unexpected.
Yeah, little off the rails.
At some point you don't expect it, right? Which is good and ultimately creates for a pretty consistent performance that makes him scary, makes him spooky. You know, when he's in a room with somebody else, you don't quite know what he's going to do. And that's very interesting. So I think he did a fantastic job. He was really good in this. I apologize for not mentioning him earlier. I wasn't sure if... I guess it's not really a spoiler. He's in the trailer, right? We all know what's going on, so it's fine. Ultimately, yeah, for a small cast, they do a really fantastic job bringing this together. Even understanding that they didn't really understand what was happening when they were filming the movie. You know, in interviews, Robert Pattinson and Kenneth Branagh, they've stated like they weren't even really sure how these concepts work either, how these ideas all come together to make a fluid film. But I think just like the actors in like Avengers Endgame, the actors don't necessarily have to see the big picture. As long as they can see their picture well enough to put together a consistent performance in their character, it's up to the director and the editor to really pull that all in and make it work. And in that way, I think this movie does. I really do.
Agreed.
So... with that being said, Andy, would you recommend Tenet?
Yeah, I absolutely would. Big summer blockbuster from one of our greatest living directors right now, Chris Nolan. Incredible action, incredible sci-fi, incredible concept. Very complicated, very convoluted. It doesn't have the character depth that a lot of his other movies have had and he's been kind of known for. But I think the spectacle kind of overshadows that. And this movie has been really divisive. Some people have not liked this direction of this film. Other people have loved it. But I think it's really incredible. It's a good time at the movies. You're going to see things you've never seen before, which is always what he's trying to do. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I would recommend it as well. This movie is challenging, and I think sometimes you need to go to the movies and challenge yourself a little bit. If you've heard this review and thought to yourself, well, it sounds complex, but maybe they're just being coy because they don't want to give too much of the plot away, or well, maybe they just didn't get it, but I'll get it. Go ahead. Go see it and write us in, email us, or comment on Facebook and tell us what you thought of this movie and whether or not you got it, because... we're going to go see it again. I can't wait to go see it again. I almost bought tickets today for another show this weekend just so I could get another one in before the show next week and report on it. I still might. It is a challenging film, and I think you should challenge yourself because we need more movies like this. We need more movies with like new, original ideas that aren't just some new, like, they're not just some newfangled remake of what we've already seen. That's what so many of our summer blockbusters would have been had movies been coming out this summer. This one is different in a wholly unique way, and yes, it might be too much. Nolan may have gone too far, but go see it for yourself. And tell us what you think. That's what I think about Tenet. I think it's a really cool movie. I'm glad I watched it. I can't wait to go see it again. You should go see it too. Wow, what a review. Good Lord, Andy.
What a movie, yeah.
Do we do a good job? I think we might have lost people in there a little bit. Maybe there were a couple times when I was talking, it was like, this is nonsense coming out of my mouth. I sound like a lunatic right now, but I don't know. We should talk about some news. Normally, this is where we do our segment for the middle of the show, the death of cinema or trailer park. We talk about new trailers. We're not doing either of those this week. We have a bit more of a somber story. Andy, you want to take this one?
Yes. Over the weekend, we were very sad to learn that Chadwick Boseman, who of course played Black Panther, passed away due to a 4-year battle with colon cancer at the age of 43. Way too young. And no one knew that this was the case. No one knew he was battling cancer, not only for so long, which meant he was actually actively filming multiple films while battling cancer. It's really incredible, but also really sad that he kind of had to or chose to fight this battle on his own and not make it public. But that happened over the weekend. It's very sad, very devastating to everyone fans of film, particularly the Marvel universe. He was the first really prominent Black superhero, but Black character. So it was really sad, and we wanted to just touch on it, remember him.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about this, and this may not be the longest segment. It may not have enough meat to be any kind of middle segment in the middle of our show, but we thought, this is bigger than just like a typical news story. There's a short list of actors and actresses who have passed away in the past. At times, it felt untimely. That have shocked the world. The ones I think of are people like Heath Ledger. Maybe Philip Seymour Hoffman, if you're a big fan of art house cinema, Robin Williams, and when I found out what happened to him, to Chadwick, I felt the same way. Like this feeling of like surprise. And the first thing I said, my mom told me. I drove down to Houston, and she said, "Hey, we got out of the car. Christina and I, 4 hours in the car, just got out of the car, got home. She said, "Hey, you're not gonna believe it. The guy who played Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, passed away." And I was like, "What?" She said, "Yeah." I was like, "Nah, that can't be real. Fake news." And then I hopped on Twitter and was like, "Oh my god." This happens every once in a while, right? In film and television, a celebrity passes away. This one feels different. I can talk about why that is for me. Andy, you want to take a swing at it for you?
It's different. I think because he was just so promising, and he was such a positive role model for everyone, and particularly to the Black community. And it's a representation is important, and it was really important to see themselves in a superhero. We've talked about the Wonder Woman being the same kind of thing for women. So it was just really sad and shocking to see this kind of bright and shining star. And he'd also played other iconic characters like Jesse Robinson, James Brown, and there was a I can't remember the judge he played, but he had played some of these iconic Black roles on his way to the Marvel films, and yeah, just really devastating to be taken so young at the kind of the height of his career.
Yeah, and on top of all of those, like, he was good. Like he's one of those actors who lights up the screen, who's very good. He's very charismatic and confident, and he feels so honest and down to earth. And to take on roles like Jackie Robinson or T'Challa, the Black Panther, is huge. To be able to kind of carry that mantle in a way that hasn't been done a whole lot in cinema before, especially when it comes to Black superheroes, is incredibly challenging. And he was able to do it with kind of care and grace that felt so real and genuine, and led to people coming up to him in the airport all the time, doing the Wakanda forever. To a point where he started saying in interviews like, "Please stop, like it is obnoxious, like how much you guys do that to me." And like he was coming on a late show, it's all people were talking about. But it was such a big role, and it was so important, and it is, I think. And that's why it's frustrating. And it's particularly challenging to find out he was diagnosed in 2016, which means he did all of his Marvel roles, starting with Infinity War, right? Starting with Civil War, I think the first Marvel film he's in. He had already been diagnosed, and now he's appearing as a superhero, keeping us all under wraps. And now he's doing he's walking the red carpet and he's doing interviews and he's doing Make-A-Wish Foundation stuff and going to hospitals and visiting kids who were sick while he's battling this thing on his own. It's really eye-opening to see how people will have to do. Everybody has to deal with their own demons, I guess. And he had this challenge and he was able to persevere through that. It's really incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, some people said it's really sad that he couldn't be open about it because, it probably would have hurt his career or it just wouldn't have been a good look. And he wanted to have like the, strong, confident look on through all these movies and shows and everything he was doing. So it was, it's sad that he kind of had to battle that privately.
It's really amazing that he was able to persevere through that and continue acting and turning out these incredible performances, to also be a hero in a lot of ways, I think, for the Black community and representing them as this superhero, right? Who's so important, especially considering the themes of Black Panther and what's going on with Killmonger in that film. It's right. Amazing to me that he had a circle of family and friends so close that nobody leaked this. That's also really incredible. Nobody said
I was like, how did TMZ not?
Right. Yeah, how did nobody leak this to the press? How did nobody not take a payoff and tell the world what was going on? Nobody did. He fought this in his own way. He did it the way he wanted to, and that's what's so incredible. That in the age of the information and Twitter, he was able to pull that off. It's incredible. It's like a magic trick.
Right. And I was thinking about Black Panther, the film itself, and it was a really unique film in that it wasn't just a Black superhero. It was about, kind of issues of the Black community. It was about, globalization versus isolation. There were like real stakes in this film, and you had, a Black lead and a Black antagonist, and all this African inspired dress and customs, and it was just kind of a celebration for the Black community, the film itself, not just the Black Panther character, but it is. So it was a really important film, which he led.
Right. Since he passed on Friday, we've had an outpouring of love and support on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else, social media. Fan art has been going out. Some of it really fantastic, other a little overdone. But I mean, I understand grief is a challenging thing. His last tweet from his account explained what happened with a candid photo of him. I can pull it up on the stream right here. And this is now the most liked tweet ever on Twitter, which is crazy. And it's tough, man. Like I know a lot of people said, "Hey, how am I supposed to tell my tell my son or daughter that Black Panther is not going to be around anymore?" And it's not that Black Panther won't be around, right? Obviously, they will do something with the character. And Marvel put out about a 4.5-minute tribute to Chad, which is outstanding, by the way. You should totally go watch it. It's really good. A lot of behind the scenes stuff and interviews and people who really worked with him and understood him, I think. I think it's challenging because of the strides it felt like he made in bringing being Black to the big screen in a way that we haven't really seen before. And watching Tenet, right? Watching John David Washington run around in that film as the protagonist is already one thing, but watching like the trailers in front of Tenet, right? Watching trailers for things like Candyman or watching HBO Lovecraft Country, like we are seeing like black power in film that we haven't seen before ever, I don't think. And Black Panther was such a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just ideologically. So, man, really a bummer. Any other thoughts on this, Andy?
No, it's just It's incredibly sad, the passing of Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, it's really something. So with that, we'll move on to our next film. Andy's gonna be taking the summary for this one. Andy, please take it away.
The New Mutants. So this movie has been long gestating. It was supposed to come out 2.5 years ago, spring of 2018. It was pushed back, delayed, had reshoots and more reshoots, and then it was about to come out, and then coronavirus hit and delayed even further. It finally has come out, and so we went to see it. We hadn't heard great things, but we wanted to see what this is all about because we've been talking about it for the better part of 2-3 years. So the story it centers on a young there's a mutant story, X-Men, think X-Men, of a young mutant named Danielle Moonstar, who wakes up in this hospital, kind of school for mutants, and she meets a couple of other mutants, and they kind of make this ragtag group of think of something in the vein of the Breakfast Club. They don't get along. They all kind of have past trauma. They're learning to control their powers, and they don't. Some of them don't even really know what they are. Meanwhile, they're being overseen by this really creepy Dr. Reyes, played by Alice Braga, who's tells them, once you can kind of control yourself, then we'll move on to the next school, or you can get out of here. But something doesn't seem quite right. They seem to be trapped in this hospital. They don't know anyone. They can't get out. They're not getting any answers. The film also stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Charlie Heaton, who was, of course, in Stranger Things, and a few others. So that's our setup. It's much more in the vein of it's got horror elements. It's got, like I said, some teen Breakfast Club style elements. It reminded me of several other films. It's got a lot of major problems, but it does have some good ideas, and there are some positive things about the film. And ultimately, I think it suffers from bad execution. So, Zach, what'd you think?
New Mutants is a disappointing film. And it's, let me explain. It's not disappointing because it's a bad movie. It's disappointing because somewhere in this mess of what is happening in here, there is probably a very good film. There is a version of this script. There's a version of this idea based on, obviously, a comic book that's probably much better. That was probably really good. This movie has a pretty good cast. It's very intimate. There's only 6 characters. There's a couple other extras you see on occasion, but otherwise, that's really our core is 6 characters. We've got 5 young mutants and a doctor. These mutants who are discovering their powers, who have these unique abilities. In a lot of ways, this is another swing at the original X-Men formula, right? These people discovering these powers they have, and this supernatural ability to affect the world in an interesting way. You take that, you lock these characters in a small, creepy setting, and you introduce Blumhouse-like horror elements. This sounds great. Like, what doesn't work about this, right? Like, this could totally work. Not to mention, you've got really great young actors. These aren't just kids from nowhere. You've got Anya Taylor-Joy, you've got Maisie Williams, you've got Charlie Heaton. This seems
Maisie
like
Williams.
A home run. Yeah. And it's not. And that's so frustrating to me because, like, at its core, this movie works. In fact, I would argue if they just put this on streaming, I think it would be doing pretty well right now. I really do. But Disney decided to put this in theaters after it got delayed again and again and again. At this point, this is a 3-year-old film. It was shot in 2017. I don't get it. I don't understand the marketing behind it. I don't understand why it is out in the format that we have it. It feels like there's if this was the Justice League, people would be asking for the Snyder Cut. Like, there is a better version of this movie somewhere, and it just never came together. They ran out of money, or Disney bought 20th Century Fox, or somebody somewhere cut off funding and said, "You've got 2 hours of footage? Great, cut it in 95 minutes and make it a movie. It's fine. We'll fix it in post." And it's really frustrating, but I want to talk about what works. I want to talk about what doesn't work. Andy, what's the best place to kick this off?
So let's talk about our characters. So our kind of ragtag crew is made up of Maisie Williams, who plays Rain Sinclair, Anya Taylor-Joy,
formerly of Arya Stark from Game of Thrones.
Right. Anya Taylor-Joy, who we've seen in lots of film, plays Ilyana Rasputin, which you couldn't get a more Russian name. That'd be like calling me John America or something like. Yes. And she's Russian. Like we said, Charlie Heaton. And then we have Blue Hunt, newcomer, who plays the lead Daniel Moonstar. Henry Zaga plays a character named Roberto da Costa. And these 5, like I said, it's like Breakfast Club. They're not getting along. They're not friends, but they eventually learn to kind of work together. They all have different, very unique powers, a lot of which you've kind of seen before. So it wasn't like super, engaging. And then you also have Ilyana, which is Anya Taylor-Joy's character. Her power seems kind of OP. She can like open dimensions to other world and has like an armor on her hand and a sword. I was like, that it seems like you should have gotten out of here a long time ago. Like, but so we have this ragtag crew. they're fine. I just don't think they're given very much. A big problem for me is this setting. They're supposed to be in this alleged hospital. It doesn't look like a hospital, and there's
No.
no other staff. There's no other. There's literally one doctor. There's like, there's a scene where one of the characters says, "Oh, I got to do dish duty." And I was like, "For who? There's 5 other people here." And who's cooking
Who
your
assigned you
food?
to dish duty? What do you have a schedule? Who's running that?
Yeah,
I guess.
who cooked the food? There's no one here. Like so there's not enough people in this film to make it look like they're at a hospital. Like at no point did it even look, or would you even think that they would be in this setting? And maybe that was like a budgetary issue, but it really, it's one of the many things that just doesn't work.
Yeah. So there's this hospital, this setting we're in. I'll talk about the characters in a minute. Millbury Hospital is what it's called. We don't know where it is. We don't know what country it's in. We don't know. We don't get any of that. We don't get any of that setting. Our character basically just our main character essentially wakes up at this hospital in the beginning of the film. Our one doctor explains, "Hey, you're here because this is where mutants go, and you have a gift. So you're here until we release you, and we know you're safe to the world." That's really what we get. This hospital like does not look like a hospital at all, and like on the inside it looks more like a prison, which I guess is the point.
Yeah.
But like from the exterior shots, it is so clearly not a hospital. Like there's one shot where our characters are up in like this clock tower, and like there's a wide, and it looks like they're in a village. There's like multiple buildings that run back for like a mile and a half, and we never find out anything about those. And on top of managing these 5 kids who are all running around, these 5 teenagers who have superpowers and can essentially run around unguarded, we have one doctor who's watching them. There's no security. There's no security force. There is no team of crack doctors or mutants
Yeah,
that take
there's
control
no
of them.
nurses, no orderlies, no
Right.
staff.
None of that. And in a way, that gives us an opportunity to have an intimate story. With only 6 characters, we have the ability to have our characters feel very strong with their powers, right? Because every one of them has powers that feel super cool. It makes them feel very, very, very niche as these mutant characters that we're now meeting for the first time. And it gives us the ability to learn more about them and who they are. But New Mutants doesn't give our characters a chance to breathe because it feels like it's racing to the ending. Like I said, it feels like it was cut short. It feels like in the edit they thought, you know what, this doesn't make sense. It's confusing. Maybe there's scenes they just didn't get around to shooting. Let's just string it together and we'll kind of just make it work. It's kind of non-linear, but it's fine. And we end up having a lack of establishing shots, of setting to understand where we're at, a lack of any kind of like semblance of time to understand how long we've been here or when we got here or how long it's been since a previous event happened. Things feel out of place. Things don't feel right in the hospital, and not because we're in this strange place where horror things are happening, because it's just a poorly put together film. And I don't know why it had to be that way, because it feels like there was enough here to make it work, but somebody somewhere along the way said, hey, we need to shift course. People aren't going to like this. Test audiences didn't like this. Let's just turn it into this quick romp and put it out in theaters, and it's fine. And that's really disappointing, because I think this intimate story of mutants like could create a really passionate fan base, right, around these 5 characters. Like you said, the Breakfast Club of mutants. How does that not work, right?
Yeah,
Especially
totally.
when you introduce these horror elements that when you start talking about.
And these are big stars. It like Maisie Williams. This was when Game of Thrones was still a popular thing.
Yes, it was 2017. It was hot. That was the time.
Charlie Heaton, same thing from Stranger Things. Anya Taylor-Joy. Like these are hot characters, and you had a lot, and it's totally ruined and wasted. And so one thing that gets me is the writing is all over the place. Like sometimes we'll get some good dialogue and good scenes, and they'll be talking about their issues, working through things, and then like towards the end, when Ileana kind of goes ham with her power, she does all these like Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque one-liners that just come out of nowhere. It reminds me of something from like an 80s action film where he's like, it's like when he kills Sharon Stone in Total Recall. He's like, now I asked for a divorce, kind of like there all these really bad lines just come out of nowhere. But like I said, it's juxtaposed with some really sweet moments where their friendships and bonds are being formed, and people are talking about problems and working through their issues. And then you get that it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't understand why they couldn't have either put more money into fixing it or just sat down with somebody who was like, no, let's put together something cohesive here. I think there has to be enough footage for a good film, but like it feels like it was like I mean, if I didn't know any better, I'd say they had a bunch of reshoots to change direction because it didn't feel like it worked. Its lack of setting indicates like a lack of really care for how this was going to fit into a greater universe. There's briefly mention of other characters in the X-Men universe here. They mentioned Professor Xavier at one point and a school for gifted children and that kind of stuff. In the credits of the film, there's a bit that mentions footage used from the film Logan, which I didn't notice. And Andy was actually able to identify what in the film was from that. Yeah, I had missed that. Logan, super fan over here, Dr. Draper. So it does fit into a larger universe, but it's like intentionally closed off. There's no post-credit scene. There's no great hint at any kind of sequel. Like, it really just feels like they made this thing that was supposed to be a foundation for something greater, and then they just got scared and bailed halfway through. And I don't know if that's because of the Disney acquisition, but as far as I know, this film was basically done when Disney bought it. So it probably hasn't changed a whole lot.
Yeah, I was going to say this movie is so bad, it has footage from another movie in it, it just sounds like it was for budget reasons more than anything. And part of the problem is the plot, because they're supposed to be trying to harness their powers and then kind of move into the next school, and like that, the path to that or how that's supposed to happen isn't real clear. What their powers are and how they control them, how they got them. Sometimes it digs in too much and then not enough. It's just really all over the place.
Yeah, and it doesn't take any time to explain anything. Whereas Tenet does the opposite. It almost explains too much and it starts to confuse you. This film doesn't bother. There's a great scene when we get a good kind of Breakfast Club moment, right, where Ileana, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, spikes our doctor's drink or tea or something in the evening, and she falls asleep, and our teenagers are able to run loose, and they're playing music and they're dancing like in Breakfast Club. I mean, it's right out of the playbook, right? They're screwing around, and one of them's drinking. And all I could think when her character says, "Oh, I spiked her drink. Now we can let loose." Great. What did you spike it with? Where did you get drugs to spike a drink? How did you know that would work? How did you sneak that in? And then they're like, drinking? Where did you get alcohol? How did you get that? Where did that come from? Our characters have a change of clothes. They all have a wardrobe. Who brought these clothes in? Who knows what sizes they are? Like, none of this is explained. And I'm telling you, I think there's a version of this movie where that was explained, but it was too complicated or too long or didn't test well, and they thought, cut it all. We'll just turn it out. 95-minute romp, whatever. Let's talk about the horror.
Right.
We need to talk about the horror in this movie.
So this is one of the things that I think does work, is there are a lot of horror elements, and that's what was supposed to set this apart from all the other comic book movies. It's like, this is comic books, but mixed with horror. And we do get kind of our characters, as they're struggling with their powers and their past, they kind of these manifestations of their past begin to happen, and they have to kind of relive some of their nightmares. That some of that stuff is truly scary. There's like some boogeyman stuff that's real disturbing, and there's lots of other things that are like proper scary. And that is one of the things that works. That was like, if you had leaned into the horror more, if you had more of a horror movie, it definitely would have been. I think it definitely would have worked better.
Yeah, I was reminded of like It Chapter 1. We have these young characters who are all seeing these visions, and it's unique to each person, and these visions start to bleed over onto themselves. Something at this facility is causing them to see these horrific things, and one of them sees this horribly burned woman who's like chasing them. Another person sees these really long, lanky, like Slenderman type characters with these smiley face masks on. Creepy stuff. If you're watching the trailer on the live stream, you can see some of it. But not only is this not really ever explained, but there's not enough of it. And it's not scary enough. The imagery's good, but like, dial that stuff up. Crank it, like, I want to get some good horror. We're in the age of Blumhouse horror. Horror films are like in a renaissance right now. They're doing great. What are we doing wrong here? Like, why didn't they lean into this? That's what the movie is, right? There's these horror elements to it, and it feels like all of this was toned down and if somebody said this is too spooky or people aren't really gonna like this, let's turn it down. Mark my words. I'm predicting Blumhouse Pictures will come out with a superhero-based horror film sometime in the next soon. Like I'm telling you, somebody will rip off this idea and do it better. Because having characters that can fight back against the darkness is neat. That's cool. That's something I haven't seen a whole lot of with these unique powers. You know, that's interesting.
Well,
it's like Avengers
also
horror, and nobody's done it yet. It's cool.
I was going to say it's really neat to see just new faces, new, like it says, the new mutants. You know, mutants that aren't Wolverine and Storm and Magneto and Professor X, people that we haven't seen and that can do different things. You know, one of our characters, like I said, Ilion is a little bit OP, and she has like a sword and can travel to another dimension. But then Maisie Williams is kind of like Beast. She kind of turns into like a werewolf. One of our other characters is kind of like the Human Torch, or he can manipulate fire. Charlie Heaton's character can kind of possess and release energy. So we have some interesting powers, and then that's another thing that fails. It never really comes together as a team to kind of fight the big bad guys.
Yeah. Seeing that they used footage from the film Logan and seeing that this is a modern X-Men setting made in the X-Men universe of 20th Century Fox, it is hard to deny this idea that Logan was supposed to be the end of a chapter of X-Men, and New Mutants in title and in tone is supposed to be a new beginning. It is an intimate tale of these young mutants who are learning about themselves and the world they're in, and it is completely self-contained. Like, and this could have been such a great jumping off point for Disney. It really could have been something that feels trendy and new, and it totally wasn't. And I'm just bummed. I guess and ultimately that's why I'm disappointed. I'm not disappointed because it's a bad movie. I'm disappointed because it could have been a much better film, and it isn't. And it feels like it's because somebody didn't give it a chance. They didn't give it the fair shake it deserved. That's really how I feel.
Well, I'm ready for recommendations.
Should we talk about really quick before we get to it? Should we discuss the idea of the prominent same-sex relationship in this film, or should we just leave that for people to?
Well, you've already mentioned it, but yeah, well, that
no, I have, yes.
There is a step in representation here. Our main character, Danielle, which you can kind of see in the trailer, it hints at her and Maisie Williams develop a same-sex relationship, which is definitely a first I've seen in comic book film. This is very prominent.
Very prominent. And you know, the idea of this movie getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back and delayed and kicked around, it makes you wonder if that's one of the things that scared them. You know, Disney's a very family-friendly company. They have same-sex relationships. At the end of the Last Jedi, there's two characters in the background you can barely see kissing. So obviously Disney's cool with it. But it's weird, man. Like, I see that on screen, and none of that's, I don't think, really indicated in the trailer. I mean, I think there's one shot in here that I'm looking at now, and I understand that's what's happening, but I didn't know that going in. And in the age of diversity and inclusion, wouldn't that be something you'd want to stand on as a point of pride? Instead, it feels a little bit like they're hiding it. And I don't know. It's like
checking a box.
I mean, I don't know, maybe. So, I don't know. It's also worth mentioning the co-creator of the comic, The New Mutants, came out on Facebook and Twitter the day this film released and said, I've finally seen the finished cut. I didn't have anything really to do with it. He was disappointed to see that they'd whitewashed his cast. Which is disappointing. Two of our five are people of color. It's worth mentioning, but not as prominently as they were in the comic. I think one of our characters was black in the comic. We don't get that level of diversity here, so it's also been railed on for that. I mean, I wonder if you look at the broad strokes and if somebody at Disney thought this was bad PR, but at the same time, why would they put it in theaters? Are they trying to give it the breathing room it needs to succeed, or are they sticking it in front of Tenet and in front of other movies and hoping they can sneak it by us and nobody will make a big deal about it?
I think studios know that you got to start putting things in theaters if you're going to have people come to your blockbuster. Like if you didn't put out anything and then you put out your blockbuster, it's going to get like half the audience. If you start churning out if you start putting something in theaters, it's going to get people out and comfortable. And I think New Mutants was just, hey, we can put this out, we can say it's new, people can go out and see it. We know it's probably going to be a failure, but it'll get people in the mood and in the routine of going to the movie. So then when we come out with a bigger film, we'll actually have an audience. That's my theory.
I know. It feels a little like cannon fodder, and like I said, it feels like they didn't put the care into this that they needed for this to work. What a disappointing new beginning for what could have been the 20th Century Fox X-Men universe that I assume after this is totally toast. I mean, I'm bummed. They could, and honestly, they could make a sequel to this, and I bet it would work. They could make a miniseries, and I bet it would work, but they won't.
They might just remake it. Like it's. I mean, we'll see.
At its core, the core idea is great, and the acting is good, and the characters are good, and I think it works. But like, man, they just totally phoned it in the worst way. So yeah, that's New Mutants. Any other thoughts for recommendations, Andy?
I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend the New Mutants?
Overall, no, but I would say save it for streaming. If you're a big Marvel fan, if you're a fan of the X-Men, if you want to check out what this film that's been in development and been pushed back so much, I do think it is worth giving it a watch on streaming if it's something you're already subscribed to. Once I guess it'll eventually come to now probably Hulu. It's probably too adult for Disney Plus, but whenever I think it is worth watching at some point, not buying a ticket for, and it's short. It's only 90 minutes. So overall, no, don't go see it in theaters, but save it for streaming.
Yeah, same boat. Save it for streaming. And honestly, I know I talked a big game here, like this movie could have been better. As a streaming film, I think this is great. For 90 minutes on a streaming service, I think this is pretty solid. It's self-contained. It's not a big mini-series. It's just a thing you can watch with 6 characters. It's very simple. It's got good action. It's got some decent horror elements. It's got great acting. I think as a streaming film, this would have done great. I don't know why they wanted to put it in theaters. I know it's not doing great at the box office. Like I don't understand the marketing around this one, but I think at its core, there's a good movie here. And I think if you have a streaming service, it will be on Disney Plus, more than likely. Give it a shot. Honestly, it's really not that bad, but you do not need to go see this movie in theaters, like at all. Do not go see Tenet. Like just don't go see Tenet. That's what you
For sure.
And with that, that wraps our show. Good Lord, what a week at the movies, Andy.
Absolutely. Two in theatrical new films. Who'd have thought we would ever be back here?
Who would have thought? What are we watching next week?
We are going to be watching Disney's Mulan, the new live action. For you can watch it too for the steep price of $30, or you can wait 90 days and watch it on December 4th. So that'll be Mulan on Disney Plus. And we're also going to be taking a look at I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is the new Charlie Kaufman film that's coming out on Netflix on Friday. Charlie Kaufman, of course, is known for Eternal Sunshine and the Spotless Mind, Being John Malkovich, Adaptation, Synecdoche, New York. Very, very surrealist films that he's made. And so we're anxious to see what this newest one is that's going to be on Netflix. So those are going to be our 2 for this week.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you for my own fiscal responsibility that we had figured out some brilliant way to not have to both pay for Mulan, but I think we both are. So we're going to take the hit for you out there on the internet. All right. So we will tell you how Mulan is next week. And also I'm thinking of ending things, which I'm very excited about. I know nobody's heard of, but that's some bold cinema. I hope. And Andy and I are missing it, so it'll be good. If you enjoyed the show this week, we do live streams of the episode every Tuesday evening on Facebook at Offscript Film Review. So come follow us over there, like the page, and let us know what you got going on. Maybe fill us in what you've been watching lately or what you thought about Tenet. We'll read your correspondence on the air. We got Twitter, we got Instagram, and we post our lives to YouTube as well as posting our podcast in audio form to all the usual podcast outlets. So if you have the means, subscribe. It's absolutely free, costs you nothing to support a small podcast like ours. It would mean the world to us. Leave us a rating and review if you can as well. 5 stars, please, and just a couple words. It helps us in that great algorithm in the Apple sky. Or
That's right.
Our website is offscriptfilmreview.com. You can email us at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com to let us know what you think of the show, what movies you want to see, or, just whatever's on your mind. And we'll talk about it. And we'll be back next week for Mulan, and I'm thinking of ending things. From all of us at Offscript, the home of bold cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.